Tennessee This Week from WATE's 6 on Your Side starts now.
Hello and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Bo Williams. On Thursday, Knox County Commissioners got a walkthrough of the Richard L. Bean Juvenile Detention Center. Commissioners, including the commissioners on the facility's new board, got to see operations firsthand. This after it spent weeks, as you know, in the headlines. We've been telling you how 2 employees were fired in apparent retaliation by longtime Superintendent Richard L. Bean. The backlash prompted him to announce his retirement, with the facility's new interim leader, Brian Bivens, slated to take over next month. I'm joined now by Knox County Commissioner Larsen Jay, who is on the new board for the facility, and we're going to talk a little bit about your tour yesterday and kind of get your thoughts moving forward as well. So let's start. First of all, thanks a lot for coming in.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Let's first talk about yesterday, or on Thursday. How did that go? What did you take away from the tour walking to the facility?
Well, I've been to the facility before, but it's been a number of years, and so it was a good refresher, first and foremost. I was proud to see that all 11 commissioners came and spent the entire time on the tour, engaged, informed, and what I really walked away with was a sense that it is a safe environment, it's a clean environment, and it's a place that has a lot of hope within those walls. It's not, there's nothing bad going on right now that really requires us to be of major concern. It's about sort of using this point in time to go forward. So it's clean, it's professional, and the staff that we met are very engaged and are excited about what's next.
I know we had Brian Bivens on a couple of weeks ago, and he said that was one of the big things he wanted to first address was the staffing there.
Yes.
So from your take, like you said, they seem to be very engaging. Yeah. Do we need more staffing?
Absolutely, yeah. He's already in the bubble now. He's working hard, but they're clearly understaffed. There's some scheduling issues. There's some coverage issues. He needs more officers, but he also needs more personnel and staff to help run the facility, and he needs to sort of get that structure, command structure in place for the long term of the center. So there's definitely some hiring that needs to be done, and also some reconfiguration of the schedule and the current positions that are there. And there's a little bit of a reset that has to happen on the staffing model. Like, as you know, if you don't have a great team, nothing else matters. So that's his priority.
You're only as good as the people around you.
100%.
That's for sure. And is that really the main focus you want him to take care of? Or do you think, because like you said, he's in an interim role, so when he's done, that's where you want things as far as staffing, or what else do you want to get out of that?
He's in an interim role, just as our board is to some extent, for really the next 6 months. And the very first thing is staffing priority. But he also has other big concerns that has to look at an antiquated security system and some policies and procedures that don't exist that really need to. And how does the entire facility operate 24 hours a day, 365? And what is the sort of internal mechanism? You've got 2 people that have run it for nearly 50 years, and most of it's on paper or in their head, and that has to change and get to a point where it's has some sustainability and it has some processes and procedures.
As far as the board, then, where do you guys come in as far as supporting here? What is your role now? Like you said, you guys are also, as far as you see it, a temporary role also. So what do you need to be doing to help out here and to keep all of this moving forward?
Yeah, ultimately the governing body is the Department of Children's Services for the state of Tennessee. That's sort of the hierarchy umbrella, and so working with the state is first and foremost part of Mr. Bivens' job and ours. And really now this board of directors is the next level of oversight and supervision for a period of time, and then the administrator and the staff and the team and going on, and then eventually a relationship maybe with the sheriff and what that looks like. But our role right now is to help support him and what does he need, but also help guide him and help him prioritize sort of what's first, next, and then think about what the long-term look of the board is and the function of the board is. So I'm using this 6 months to say, what is the model that should be going forward for the next 10 or 20 years, not just this first 6 months.
Because you've commented that as far as the commissioners are concerned, this is temporary. We need to have people from outside of, I guess, politics, if you will, to be on this board.
That's my hope.
I know that's what you had mentioned when this was first formed. So how does that happen? I mean, what do you do to make sure you get the right people in place here?
Well, I brought it up at our board meeting yesterday. I'm only one of 5 votes on that board, so I do have to convince my colleagues. But what I said was, I think that the long-term sustainability model of the board it should be something with maybe 2 elected officials.
Okay.
On the board, but maybe a bigger board that has more professionals from the private sector that work in juvenile services. It could be people that have expertise in mental health, ACEs and childhood trauma, social work, education, any number of different sort of social services. What can we do to put on the board? What people and professionals can we put there that will help the children that we are serving, and then help the partnerships grow in a way that makes it the very best detention facility in the state. Now, we hope we should never have a detention facility,
right.
and certainly we would hope that there would be never anyone in there, but it's a reality of where we are, so we should surround it with professionals to, I think, bring an environment of hope and rehabilitation to the facility, not treat it like a jail, but treat it like a place that is going to support the children that we're serving.
You think it's kind of a forgotten area sometimes because we don't talk about it a lot? And like you said, it's not you don't want to view it quite as a jail. Hopefully you're getting to these kids early so that this doesn't carry on into adulthood, whatever they've done. But sometimes you feel that it's kind of in the back of our heads. We know it's there, but we don't think about it a whole lot.
Well,
we need to pay more attention.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something that we haven't thought of in a long, long time, obviously. But when I sat down with Judge Tim Irwin, who is the juvenile court judge, he said, look, we might have cases that are, runaway situations or 1 or 2 night stays and things that can be quickly intervened on. We might go all the way to children that have murder accusations and trials coming up, and every spectrum in between. And so it could be as many as 14 or 15 kids, which is what is right now, as high as 60, 70, with a capacity of 120. Literally, it's changing every day and evolving, but it's something we don't think about how important it is, because yes, when crimes are committed or things go wrong, you have to have a place for a penalty and you have to have a structure, but this is really kind of a last resort place for a lot of children. And what can we do to surround them with the services and the people and professionals needed to make better choices and to come out of here in a productive way? Because they will be our neighbors and they will be our residents of the county, whether we like it or not. And so what are we going to do while they're there?
Yeah. Is that kind of your role as chair to keep this now? Because we should mention you're now chair of this board.
Yes.
To kind of keep this game plan moving forward, I guess. How do you see your role right now?
I really see my role over the next 6 months of focusing on the transition period.
Okay.
Mr. Bivens will take over officially at the beginning of August. He's got staffing, immediate needs. But what I did in the meeting yesterday was list all of the things the other board and people from the community wanted to hear and see and understand. And so my job is to sort of organize that, have monthly board meetings where we can work with the administrator and with the juvenile court judge and DCS to say, how can we inform and educate and figure out we got some issues and we got to deal with those, but how do we tackle those one bit at a time? I think the other role that I have is to rebuild a little bit of trust in the community and transparency of what this is and what it isn't, and how we can be the most open and transparent board and facility so that people see it as an asset, not as a liability.
And we should point out, after the tour this past week, there was a meeting, an open meeting. What did you take from that? What did you hear in that meeting? Anything that surprised you? Any questions? Or just what was your takeaways there?
I think the first takeaway is that the public is interested. First and foremost, not just the media, the public is asking questions. And I think that is a key component to going to be our successful path. I've had so many people reach out to myself and other people on the board saying, I have this expertise, how can I be of help? I have this organization, I'd love to support you all. I think the public at large wants this to be a place of success, and what I heard from our other fellow commissioners and all the things that they told me they wanted to hear was, number one, the community wants to support this and wants to make it successful. My job is to kind of focus, there's a bazillion things. How do we tangibly do that? But also our role as a board is not to micromanage the administrator and his daily task. It's to guide the ship, make sure that we answer the questions, build that trust back, and then I hope put the future board in place and then transition it in a way that's very productive. And
speaking of that real quick, I know we've already kind of touched on it, the future board.
Sure.
And you said you put the proposal out there. You've mentioned that you still wait to hear back from the fellow commissioners there to see what direction they want to go. But In the meantime, you have to start putting those pieces in place in case that does come together. You have 6 months, but that's not a lot of time.
It's not. So we have to go back and look at some of the legal and structural things of the ordinance and what our job is as a commissioner in the legislative process. But we also have to start defining what are those roles. And I've worked on other boards and built other nonprofit organization boards where you gather, say, what do we need and what do we not need? And you bring those experts together and you say, do we need a social worker? Is that more important than somebody that's in mental health? How many people should be on the board? What's too big? What's too small? We'll start that probably September, October, but in the meantime, we'll kind of behind the scenes figure out what's the structural part and when do we transition that. Will it take more than 6 months? It might, but no, definitely within the first year of this, I would hope that we would transition it to the future board and put all it in place. The administrator is going to have a lot of work to do in a short amount of time, but he's committed, he has experience, he has a lot of professional expertise in the space. He actually had he had a company that helped audit other correctional facilities, so like he understands what works and what doesn't, and working towards accreditation, working towards a great relationship with DCS, I think we're on the right track.
All right. I think we're going to wrap it up there. Commissioner, we appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be talking again about this over the next 6 months. So we appreciate you coming by.
Thank you.
And stay with us. We'll have much more on Tennessee this week. Our panel of pundits will join us right after the break. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. A moment ago, we heard from Knox County Commissioner Larsen Jay following his tour of the Richard L. Bean Juvenile Detention Center and the meeting that followed. Let's bring in our panel of pundits to discuss what he had to say. Joining us today, as always, Courtney Piper, Craig Griffith, and Michael Covington. Great to see the three of you.
Thank you.
Let's talk about, first of all, just first impressions. After hearing what Larsen Jay had to say, Craig, I'm going to start with you. What kind of jumps out?
Well, I'm glad that in their inspection or tour, they didn't find any grievous error, that people weren't getting enough food or things like that. So that's good to hear. Secondly, they seem to be getting off on the right foot and trying to determine what's the most important issues they need to grapple with as a board. I'm sure that Mr. Bivens, the head of the center, has his list of things he needs to do, but now it's up to the board to determine the things that they need to do. Probably the paramount one of those would be more funding. If they're going to do the things they want to do, they're going to have to increase the budget of that organization. So we'll have to see how that works, and they have to determine the future of the board after the sheriff's department takes over in January. Are they going to work toward making a center that's rehabilitative, or is it purely detention?
Right.
So we'll have to see how those things work out over time.
Yeah. And he mentioned a couple of things on Courtney. One, he mentioned staffing, which we heard from Bivens a few weeks ago when he was here. What kind of things from Larsen Jay jumped out at you?
Well, the things that jumped out to me was that first of all, that the commissioners in this new board seems to really have a handle on the situation. They know what needs to be addressed, and they're systematically going through those things to correct it. But also, the Good Old Boy Network was alive and well in the Richard L. Bean Detention Center, and everybody just let it happen. Things like not having enough staff, antiquated technology, not having policies and procedures written down and keeping everything in everyone's head, that is going to cost you more in the end than letting the Good Old Boy Network persist in any sort of arm of state or local government. So there is a lot of cleanup here to do. And to Craig's point, one of the things that the board needs to do, it looks like, is determine what is going to be the primary mission of this facility. Is it rehabilitation or is it detention? That is what's going to drive a lot of these decisions in terms of staffing and services and how we serve this population.
Michael, how about you?
I tell you, it would take me 25 to 30 minutes just to put perspective on and expound on the topics that Craig and Courtney just mentioned. There are a lot of very big loose ends here. Mr. Bivens will take over in August. He'll run the facility until the 31st of December. The sheriff's office will take over in January, on January 1. They will have control and auspices of care for 15 months until July of 2027. I need the county commission making their mind up right now that they are going to start a search for the right person to replace Mr. Bivens, and make certain that when that agreement ends in 2027, that the sheriff's office does not take over the detention center permanently. That needs to be a self-standing operation with a leader and a team designed for juvenile detention. It is not an adult jail. So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered, and the county commission members that are on that board need to get busy.
Well, it sounds like too, and again, as we heard from Larsen Jay a moment ago, he's looking at the board right now as a short-term board. Do you kind of go with the fact too that if everybody goes along with what he's thinking, maybe having 2 elected officials, but also then reaching out to the private sector, Craig, as far as filling out that board with people from different areas, whether it's mental health, different areas like that, as members of this board to help it move forward?
Well, you need to have a board that has expertise in given areas related to the subject. In this case, expertise in relation to juvenile detention, be that mental health, be that case management, be that social workers. So I think that, yes, I think the ultimate board would be one that had that type of technical expertise and not just a group of elected officials. Because we need this board to concentrate on the Bean Center, not on all the other things that county government does.
Yeah.
I'll offer a different perspective. This institution has lost the public's trust, and because there was a lack of control and leadership. There was no structure in place to hold somebody accountable for their actions or lack of actions.
Well, I'll say there was a structure in place. They didn't
It failed.
do it.
It
They
failed
did not
because it was all of
exercise
Richard
the
Dean's,
authority that they
right.
had.
It was all of his friends.
Right.
One way to get around that is to have a certain number of elected officials on the board, because at least there is some level of accountability with that, or to have the various mayors appoint people. I would also argue that you need experts actually running the programs in the facility. You don't necessarily need them on the board. The board needs to uphold public trust and hold the director accountable to the mission and the operations of that organization. Now, with that being said, I will note that the University of Tennessee College of Social Work has a great program and great professionals that could help the Richard L. Bean Detention Center if they perceive that to fit the mission. But I don't necessarily think you need professionals on the board. You need professionals running the program, and the board provides guidance and direction and accountability.
But Lawson said he would like to have 2 elected officials on it. So if
But-
the 5-member
but 2
board,
of
that's
what? I mean-
that's
Yeah,
fine.
and that's
2
right.
of
He haven't
5.
determined how big or how
Yeah.
small the board should be. I guess that's another question too, is how many people need to be sitting on that board. Michael, you've been listening to this as well here. I mean, as far as, I know you mentioned who's running it, but also the board itself, the makeup of the board. What do you think?
Let me go ditto to Courtney's last point. All of those things and more. They really do need to take a close look at how they're structuring the organization within this Bean Center, and then the board. The board should be reflective of representation of the community. But those professionals, those persons dealing with the young people who may have been accused of murder or may have been kidnapped victims or may have been involved in some other heinous crime. You need people that are accustomed to dealing with that kind of thing every single day. And you need as Craig has mentioned, case managers, social workers. Not enough time is being spent devoting energy to the young people themselves. I'm not hearing that. And I'd like to hear that more. Touring the facility and seeing what the facility needs is great. Have the social workers been in? Have the social workers been in and found that 1 or 2 or 3 young people that really got a bad shake in that last exchange with leadership? So I just feel like they need to make sure they don't just do lip service to taking care of those young people. Get some people in there to care for them.
And Michael brings up a great point. What we have failed to discuss in all the times that we've talked about the detention center on our program is the juveniles, the kids that are in there. What is happening to them while all the adults are in chaos?
That's a good question. I mean, and maybe it comes back to, we saw after the tour there was a public meeting. There's need to be more transparency here so people understand what's happening inside.
Well, and one last thing on the board. The board needs to know what questions to ask.
Okay.
You know, if you have professional staff taking over and doing their programmatic work, the board needs to have the expertise enough to ask, is that the proper direction? Is that the way this program should be implemented? And I'm not sure you get that on a board that's staffed by public or members, just general members of the public. So, yeah, and everything they do should be oriented toward the children. Getting a proper outcome, doing as much as we can to make sure these children become productive adults in our community and aren't in a spiral of crime through their entire adult life.
Okay.
Bo, this is not a simple fix.
Right.
And it is not merely a procedural fix. There are human lives involved.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people have to remember as they're going through this process. All right, stay with us. We have much more of Tennessee This Week coming up for you right after the break. And welcome back to Tennessee This Week. Well, this week we learned that former West High School football coach Lamar Brown had taken a new position with the Maryville football program as a defensive assistant. This after Brown was relieved of his coaching duties at West in June after an internal investigation. That investigation finding there had been a significant lack of oversight within the school's football program. And if you've been following, you know the full story here. 2 members of that staff arrested, sex crimes charges. So I want to bring our panel back in here for a moment, and there you see the 2 individuals, Richard Shaver and Chad Brooks. So Courtney, let me ask you this. So Lamar Brown is now at Maryville. You know, he'd been relieved of his coaching duties at West, though I think he could teach. He could be reassigned as far as teach. Let me get your thoughts on how this has played out, and then the announcement this week that now he is at Maryville.
This is just, it's an epic situation, but not in a good way. If you saw the school board meeting earlier this month in July, it was horrendous. There were parents that wanted the superintendent's head on a platter because he made this decision to relieve Coach Brown of his coaching responsibilities, even though we, to my understanding, do not have a closed investigation on the criminal end from the Knoxville Police Department. And the school system, had an internal investigation that found that there was a significant lack of oversight. You know, for all my criticism of the Knox County school system, I do think that the swiftness of this action was the appropriate one, because again, who we're forgetting in all this are the victims. There were children, there were victims in this story. Why Maryville High School would want to assume that liability is beyond my comprehension. But they did. So he can move on over there, but that does not necessarily close the book for Knox County schools. I wish it would. You know, the parents that showed up at that school board meeting were mightily ticked off that their football coach had to be held accountable for his actions.
Yeah, I remember watching some of that as well. They're very outspoken, that is for sure. Michael, I'm going to go with you next.
Courtney was a world-class athlete at the University of Tennessee, so Courtney will be very familiar with this expression. Winning is not the most important thing. Winning is the only thing. Maryville beat West last year 35-14. Maryville intends to beat West worse this year, and I plan to be there to see it. Why Coach Lamar Brown let those 2 individuals continue to coach when he must have known something? If he was so far removed from what his coaches were doing, that he was missing the fact that young girls were being raped in an aggravated manner by 2 of his coaches, I don't think he needs to coach. I think he needs help, because his head was in the sand for football so much that he could not see crimes being committed against people's children. I have a real issue with him even still being employed in education. If he's that blind, he needs to go somewhere else, dig holes for a living, but not work with young people. I am angered by the very idea that he is allowed to continue to coach and that he'll be on the sidelines when Maryville plays West on August 29th.
Craig, we've got about a minute left.
Well, the NCAA has a term for this, lack of institutional control, and that points all the way up to the head coach. You know, if there's a problem with the water boy, it's the head coach's problem. And so the problems at the West High School, no matter how successful he's been, and he's been a very successful head football coach over the years, you know, he is responsible for the actions of those people under him. I'm not saying he's criminally responsible necessarily, and the investigation will have to say that, but he's responsible for the actions of his staff and his students. And it doesn't look to me that rewarding him with a job at another school teaches him any lesson, that he was partially responsible for what happened to those victims. And again, looking at this, it's the victims that matter. It should be, you know, even if he's the world's best football coach, I agree with Michael that I don't think he should be coaching. I don't think he should be around students anymore. So we'll have to see how it turns out.
All right, we've got about 20 seconds. Any other comments real quick before we wrap today?
I would like to say, let us always put children first. Always.
And on that note, we're going to wrap it up. We appreciate you joining us here for Tennessee This Week. Of course, we'll be back again next week. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next weekend.
The views of guests on Tennessee This Week are their own and do not represent the views of WATE 6 on your side or Next Star Broadcasting.